Okay, let's get started. Today we're going to be going over CIS Framework Controls V8. We're in the email and web browse protection area. So I'm going to go over each of these controls. We're in the middle of all the controls, going over each one um, and talking about what needs to be, what from a technical perspective needs to be done for each of these controls. I'm using the Lionfish platform to track and manage and keep track of all these different things. So um, last time I think we stopped off at implement DMARC, and the DMARC is a text file that goes into your registrar, your DNS registrar record. You can create your text file. It's basically your email address, what you're going to use for technical contacts, and some other code that goes into your registrar, your DNS registrar, which is like maybe GoDaddy or Network Solutions or something like that. Block unnecessary file types. Most like Outlook does this really well already, but you can add to it. Like if there's a exe file or an MSI file in your email, it'll block it. It won't let you receive executable files unless you zip them up or something like that. So you can block those file types in Outlook. You can block those you can add new file types if you want, like jar files, for instance. You don't want to have anything that's executable running, being sent in the email. Because by virtue of opening it, you can actually open the executable file as well and create a situation where malware would infect your computer or ransomware or something like that. Deploy and maintain email server anti-malware protection. You can use the built-in anti-malware, antivirus software that already comes with Office 365. It's pretty robust, but you could also buy Micromenders or some email product like Trend Micro, Barracuda. These are also enhance your anti-spam, anti-malware, antivirus at the email level. So it's like an email gateway. It sits on top of your email. It goes before your email. So it's the MX record instead of Outlook, and it receives email first, and then it gets filtered and then sent to Outlook second, and so on and so forth. So it's an additional layer of protection. You need to use this now on email. There's multiple SaaS platform products out there. So on your endpoints, you need to deploy and maintain anti-malware software on your servers, on your endpoints with your desktops or your laptops, your phones. All that stuff has to have anti-malware software. This can be CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or something like that. Probably want to get a next generation. It's called EDR, endpoint detection and response. In the old days, it was just called antivirus, anti-malware, anti-ransomware, but they comboed them all into one product, and that's now called EDR or XDR. Some of the companies refer to it as XDR, which is like detection and response on the endpoints. So you're going to want to get that product versus having like, free ESG, free freeware Penguin or a Vast or something. Those aren't adequate enough anymore. You want to get something called endpoint detection and response. This is Trend, SentinelOne, that kind of thing. Configure automatic anti-malware signature updates. So these products, all SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, all these products automatically update their antivirus, signatures, which are what they use to detect antivirus. They also come with AI modules built into them that can try to detect zero-day attacks. A zero-day attack is like a virus activity that has not been recognized yet by the malware EDR, XDR companies, but it's seen as suspicious activity. It could be something that's encrypting files on your computer, and it'll detect it and it'll warn you about it. So you want to not only have the AI module built into EDR, XDR, but you want to also make sure that it's updating on a regular basis. Some people control their own antivirus, like they have a Trend server on site. You just want to make sure that you can prove that Trend server is or a McAfee server or a Sophos server, that those servers are downloading and updating the clients with appropriate signatures. Disable auto run and autoplay for removable media. This isn't as much of a big deal as it was in the old days where you had CD-ROMs and you stuck a CD-ROM in your computer and your D drive, which is your CD-ROM drive, would auto run it. So if you still have those types of scenarios where you're auto running things that are in CD-ROMs and DVD-ROMs and maybe even USB drives, you just want to turn that off across the board. You can do this with a group policy if you're in an Active Directory domain, or machine by machine if you're in a computer work group environment, or you could just do it manually in a Linux box or a server or something like that. So yeah, you don't want to have auto run and autoplay running on the removable media drive. This isn't so much of a big deal anymore. It's just that it's kind of old school. Configure automatic anti-malware scanning of removable media. This still can be done with the next generation XDR and EDRs. It'll detect when you plug a USB drive into your computer, or if you put a DVD or something into the, it'll detect it. It'll run anti-malware scan on that particular drive. And it goes as far as if you copy a file onto your computer, it should be able to pause it for a second and scan that file if you're downloading something from the internet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's anytime something new is introduced to your computer, you want to make sure that your EDR, XDR product is detecting it. Enable anti-exploitation features. There are additional different switches and different capabilities that EDR and XDR products have. You want to, there are exploitation features in there you want to enable, and they're uniquely named on all of these different products. They're not like commonly named, so you can just look up what exploitation features your product has and enable them. You can also enable anti-exploitation features on your next generation firewall. So your next generation firewall can also double as a antivirus, anti-malware scanner of anything coming into your company. So anything coming over the wire can be scanned, and exploitation and man in the middle attacks and all that kind of stuff can be rooted out by your firewall, as well as your XDR product. Centrally managed anti-malware software. So this means you need an enterprise product like SentinelOne or CrowdStrike. These all operate and function from a dashboard, sometimes as a SaaS product. So if you have like a Trend Micro or Sophos servers, there'll be on-site servers that will require that you have agents installed on all your machines, and all those agents report back to a central server, and that central server is an enterprise level product. If you have something like a VAST or free AVG, it's not going to do the trick. So you're going to get rid of those and get something that has centralized management. Use behavior-based anti-malware software. This is talking about the AI, where the AI is going to detect any kind of patterns. That's what AI does, really. It reproduces pattern and pattern recognition. So if you have a zero-day attack going on, like if, for instance, something is being encrypted on your computer and no one really knows why, the anti-malware, antivirus, anti-ransomware software may spin up and say, this is unusual behavior. I'm reporting it to you. It may quarantine your computer, etc. So go ahead and deploy and use the AI component of those products. So Avast, FreeAVG, Panda, that kind of thing. Those kind of softwares don't have the AI module, so you shouldn't consider them. Establish and maintain a data recovery process. So there are a couple different components that go into this. There's a DR, data, disaster recovery plan. So you should have a disaster recovery plan. It's a document. I believe Jeremy has one that you can use as a template. I've given to him. So you can ask him for a link or an area where we can grab the DR plan. There's also something called a business continuity plan, and business continuity and disaster recovery are a little bit of a different animal. Disaster recovery is like if there's a tornado, and business continuity is like maybe um, your executive team, one of the, your CEO gets flipped out. That's not necessarily a disaster, but it's definitely something that might have to have a process that goes along with it. The process is just a step-by-step activity that you're going to follow, like a rule book or a run book that you're going to follow in the event a disaster occurs. So you're going to write out whatever disasters you think can happen, and then you're going to write out how you're going to react to them. And then in there, there's roles and responsibilities, plan of actions, um, secondary sites that you might go to, hardware equipment you might activate or buy or use, cloud products you might turn on, etc. So you're gonna have a plan, and the plan is going to create the process. So you're going to want to do that for your disaster recovery. Your business continuity plan can include a disaster recovery plan. I urge you to create maybe both, one, or combine them into one document, and you can call the document business continuity because it can include disaster recovery. Perform automated backups. So you have to back up your system. I like the rule of three, a local, cloud, and then um, something that's like deep storage or external hard drive or something else. So you usually want to have three backups in an ideal world. If you only do two, which is local and cloud, that's okay. I always like to have a third option. In the event that there is a disaster, if you have a local copy and there's a disaster, it might have been destroyed, which means that all you have to fall back on is your cloud backup, and that might not be very fast because if you have a disaster and you have to get a new facility, you might not have internet access available to do restores and all that for a while. So if you had removable storage or something like that, you would have another option. So try to keep your options open when you run backups. But the most important part of the backup is the restore. So the backup really doesn't mean anything. It's really the restore, which is the next item. Or no, sorry. You want to make sure you run restores on a regular basis, like you run a restore of your data of any some kind of random data. Have a person in your organization, like in engineering or HR or whatever, pick a file and tell you that or just rename it or copy it to a different location, and have them tell you, I've lost this file, please restore it. And then you should go through the process of restoring it and how easy or hard it is, or maybe you are trying to restore it locally, but you find out that that area has not been backed up. And so basically, or it takes like 4 hours to restore the file, which is unacceptable for one file. So you might want to refine your process, but you're going to want to use a backup product like Veeam or Blackblaze, or there are a whole bunch of different SaaS products that you can use to back your environment up. And usually there's a whole bunch of options that they allow you to point to: internal equipment, external equipment, cloud services, and then they have their own infrastructure that they'll let you back up to. Protect recovery data. That means you want to encrypt everything. Everything needs to be encrypted. So there are options when you're doing your backup. That you can use to make sure that that data is encrypted either at rest or in motion. You want to make sure that it's encrypted in both ways. It slows your backup down a little bit because it's encrypting everything, but you want to make sure that you do not have data internally in your environment that's sitting on like USB drives or local systems or the cloud where it's not encrypted, and that's how you protect that data. And also you want to make sure that you don't leave backups or physically laying around for people that can steal it and all that kind of thing. Establish and maintain an isolated instance of recovery data. This is again the rule, like part of the rule of three, where you're not having everything locally. So you definitely, if you follow the rule of three, you're gonna have a local backup, which is great. But this next rule, which would be your SaaS backup with your service provider, like Veeam can store data for you, or Amazon Web Services you can store data in the cloud or in Glacier, and they have all these different options all over the place for storing data. And then you might have the CEO take home a hard drive, a removable hard drive, like a 10 terabyte, 15 terabyte hard drive with all of your critical data on it. He takes it home, he puts it in a safe at his house. Or I've seen people actually take it to a bank. But there's a service called Data Safe. They come by and they'll pick up like a box of tapes or drives or whatever you want, and they'll go store it at a remote facility that's protected from disasters. Test data recovery, we talked about that. The backup is important, but the recovery is the most important part. If you can't recover, then you're pretty much not in good shape. And so you need to test your backups. I would test it every quarter. You don't need to test it every day or every week, but you could test it once a month. Just do a restore of a file. It doesn't take a lot. And you might be doing it anyway, and that counts as the test. If someone from one of your teams comes and says, I moved a file or I deleted it on accident, then you can just say, okay, yeah, it works. Here's when we did it. And you're going to keep track of that in some sort of format. You can have a test data recovery document, or you can have your ticketing system where you search for test data recovery, and it can produce those results. So you could make a ticket for yourself in your ticketing system that talks about how you did a test data recovery job. Network infrastructure management. Ensure network infrastructure is up to date. What this means is that they want you to patch and ensure that all of your firewalls and your network equipment, like your access points, your switches, your VPN appliances, your gateway appliances, your load balancer. There are all these different types of network infrastructure equipment, and you want to make sure that they're all patched and up to date. The best way of doing this is to run what's called a vulnerability scan. You can run a vuln scan on your equipment. It will detect if there are vulnerabilities, and some of them are good enough to detect that you're off patch or you're off firmware version. And those are the best ones to use because those will allow you every month to see that your firewall may need to be updated, your switch may need to be firmware upgraded. And so you need to have a maintenance window that you pick out, and once a month on the third Friday of the month, or this third Saturday of the month, you have a maintenance window where you upgrade your firewall, your access point. You want to keep them all up to date, and the best way to show this is being done is with a vuln scanner that shows firmware versions that it'll detect those. Establish and maintain a secure network architecture. So you want to make sure you don't have access points that are capable of, have open or low encryption levels. You want to make sure that you don't have every port in your facility live. You want to make sure that you have physical security of your server room. You want to make sure that you have encryption turned on. You want to make sure you have multi-factor authentication turned on your network hardware, even your network hardware. So your next generation firewall will have the capability of doing MFA or 2FA. And you want to make sure that those are turned on for your network gear. You want to make sure that maybe even, I've seen this go as far as only allowing a management network to access firewalls and switches and routers and access points. So that means that only if you're on a certain kind of network subnet of your environment or a VLAN, that when you're on that network, you have the power to manage those pieces of equipment. That's the ultimate level of security, where you have to plug yourself into a management port on the infrastructure in order to manage your equipment. And most of that equipment will have the ability to have a management network plugged into it, and it'll be manageable by that. That's the ultimate. But multi-factor authentication, secure access, those are good starting points. Securely managed network infrastructure. This is the same thing. Having a management network, having a management IP range, having a management VLAN, having a management subnet, and plugging the management ports of all these equipments into the port that has that switch and that VLAN or port forwarding enabled on it. So you want to make sure that you are securing your infrastructure by having having a management network. If you don't have any of that equipment, I mean, you can't do it. But can you securely manage your network infrastructure in the cloud? Yes. You can also have roles and responsibilities in the cloud that of those individuals that have the power to modify network infrastructure. You don't want to give everybody all the rights that they could possibly use as users. You want to make sure you segregate your roles and responsibilities for your cloud products in order to securely manage any of the network infrastructure you might have in a cloud environment. And that's done logically, not physically. So physically, you would manage this network with a management network with plugs. Logically, you would use it to have roles, responsibilities, and individuals that have the power to change infrastructure items. Establish and maintain architecture diagrams. There's this product called Visio. It can be used to create beautiful network diagrams. There's templates in there. You can also, if you're really don't have Visio, you can actually use PowerPoint to make little box diagrams. You can use Word to make a box diagram. So a lot of these products you can buy or use have box diagrams. Basically, a box is like, a switch. A triangle could be an access point. A circle could be a router. But in the Visio, they have actual like little icons that you can actually use. Like if you have if you have a blade center, it'll make a blade center picture of a blade center for you. And so your pictures can look really, really nice in Visio. But if you don't have Visio, if you don't want to buy Visio, $300, $900 or whatever to make beautiful maps, you can, use boxes and squares and circles and stuff like that. And you just want to make sure they're connected together and that you have that network diagram and that you maintain it on a quarterly basis. So if anything changes in your infrastructure, you want to make sure the changes are made in there. You want to make sure that there's names on your equipment, IP addresses on your equipment. I've seen people put the firmware on there so that when they change the firmware, they can show that firmwares are being updated and so on and so forth. So your network diagram should be robust. It should have a lot of good data in there. It should have like a small paragraph of information about your equipment. And you can again make it with Visio to make it beautiful, or you can make it with, and there are other products as well that do network. Like if you want to get super advanced, there's like ServiceNow that'll do like an ITOM module that'll crawl your network. There's SpiceWorks. There's all these different kinds of inventory and network architecture diagram products that you could buy and scan your network and have it be live. Centralized network authentication, authorization, and auditing. This is a term that routers and firewalls use, AAA. It's called AAA. It is basically, you can replace this with single sign-on, it's now called. It's called AAA because inside of a switch or a router or a firewall, it's usually not able to reach out to an identity engine. So they kind of made their own little baby identity engine in there. So if you have something, for instance, called a Cisco router, you could have a Cisco router and it needs to have AAA, which is a way of authenticating somebody using like Active Directory as a backend or a flat file. It's called a flat file has data in it about the username, password, and then the syslog of it keeps all of the auditing and authorization and authentication requests that are made of that particular box. And the syslog will last for a certain amount of time before it gets overwritten. But in this world, we now point all the syslogs, all the AAA, at a SIM. So the SIM product is going to collect logs from all of your devices. So this is for more of people who have old school house networks, routers, firewalls, switches. Maybe these are older and they don't have single sign-on capabilities. They'll definitely have AAA, and AAA can be used to point back at AD, Active Directory, LDAP, flat files, or maybe a different like a radius. It's something called a radius server. You can get a radius server that AAA can point at, and that has it's like a portal or a gateway to Active Directory. So definitely you can use MFA and that kind of thing, dual two-factor and syslogging to make, if you don't have AAA on your device. Use of secure network management and communication protocols. So you're going to there are different protocols that allow you to connect to these devices. So you're going to use those. They are HTTPS, and there are different protocols that you can use, different that work on different ports, um, which is what a protocol basically is. It's a port listening for a certain type of traffic. You can use that port, that traffic, like iDRAC, ILO, HTTPS, that kind of thing. You can use different protocols to connect um, to your network equipment. This is also a little bit more old school, kind of going back to the past where we used network protocols to communicate with firewalls. But if you have next generation firewalls, you're usually just using HTTPS nowadays. And as long as you're continuing to do that, you'll be fine. Ensure remote devices utilize a VPN and are connecting to an enterprise AAA infrastructure. So the AAA infrastructure basically is your identity engine, which is LDAP or Flatfile or IMAP or Active Directory. And you want to make sure that if you have a person who has a computer that wants to connect to your environment remotely, they'll utilize something called a VPN, a virtual private network. VPNs can be point-to-point from your firewall, or they can be from desktop applications, or they're built-in VPNs to Microsoft. So you can go into the concept of VPN, and you can then connect to your environment with a VPN. VPN uses IPsec, it uses certificate-based encryption, it uses all the a bunch of different types of encryption that you can use. You want to make sure it's what's called FIPS compliant, government approved, authorized compliant, and that when you log in with a VPN, it challenges you, which is the AAA infrastructure. It challenges you based on who you are, what your login account is, when you're authorized to log in, what you're authorized to do, and then all that again feeds back to your SIM, which is your log collector. So you want to make sure your VPN, your Radius server, your LDAP server, your firewall syslog server all point back to the SIM. So that's important. Establish and maintain dedicated computing resources for all administrative work. So you want to this is also a somewhat of an old school methodology which we used to use in the old days, where we used to have what's called management workstations, where we would have a particular computer that you had to go to in order to make changes for administration. This isn't so much of as something that we do anymore, but you can just dedicate a group of people or a group of computers or a group of management individuals that and their computers and count them into this dedicated computing resource group. It used to be a lot harder to make changes. Now it's doubly as hard with multi-factor authentication, dual factor authentication, and different equipment and that kind of thing. But you can create resources that are dedicated to making changes to your administration of your network, and enforce the rule of you can only use those particular devices when you do that work. Um, but yeah, that's not hard to identify. You can't, like for instance, you can't just log into Richard's computer at its desktop and then make changes to the firewall. It's like the firewall won't accept connectivity from his virtual LAN or his network, or the fact that his computer is in the computer group or the computer VLAN, and that his computer just doesn't have the power make changes to any of the infrastructure. You'd have to virtual, VPN into another network, or remote control another computer inside the management network and make changes from there. So again, you want to make sure that you have some sort of management infrastructure. And all this really is precluded by the fact that you have routers, firewalls, VLANs, VPNs, access points, Wi-Fi, cabling, server rooms, servers, that kind of thing. If you don't have any of that stuff, then you're going to have to kind of transmute this into the cloud. This is more for on-premise stuff, but you can translate it into the cloud, because in the cloud we do have firewalls, networks, but they're just not hard anymore. They're all soft. They're all logical and digital. So you can still use these same principles, and within that, you just have to be more creative in how you set up your network infrastructure in the cloud. You just don't want to have a flat network. You want to have a management network, and only certain people can log in there, and maybe only from certain resources can you make changes to that infrastructure. Otherwise, when someone compromises the flat layer, they would be able to get into your infrastructure very easily and destroy it from just the flat layer of the single type of login account that you would provide. All right, we're going to open it up to any questions. Anybody have any comments, questions? And while I'm waiting, I'll promote the fact that Jeremy has a class running right now, and for CCP, for CMMC, he's being very helpful and he's going to also be running a class for CCA, CCMMC assessors. We're all loving the use of the fact that we can use the Lionfish platform to track, manage, monitor, troubleshoot, maintain a compliance infrastructure. So as we move into this next phase of reality, the CMMC is going to be really highly important, because all government contractors need to comply with CMMC, and at least in some way, shape, or form. There are 3 different levels, and so or wherever you're going to go, you may need to comply with this particular framework, and you want to be able to show, like, maybe an auditor, or an IT person, or an assessor, that you're following these rules. So in order to do that, you're going to want to show them with this particular product that, hey, I do establish a security, I do use AAA, and here's my evidence, and that kind of thing. So this product here is the one that will keep track of it. So it's indispensable. I mean, otherwise you're going to be using Excel spreadsheets, which I actually saw our trainer pull out at the CMMC class. He pulled out his old school, Excel spreadsheet. Now he doesn't have to use that anymore, because I remember I had something that looks almost exactly the same as his, and it was just a burden to have to use all the time and share it and pass it around and update it, and it didn't have the functionality that this product does. So I'm fully on board with endorsing Lionfish, and I really find it helpful that Jeremy's is offering classes like the one you just listened to, which is highly technical. We talked about SIM and next generation firewalls, access points, routers, firewalls, AAA, multi-factor authentication, all these different things. I mean, they could be going over your head, but at least you've heard of them now, and you may want to just Google them, what that means. What is an NGFW? There's a particular set of requirements that go around having it. What is AAA? What does it really mean? I mean, I told you briefly what it was, but there's a AAA component to these devices that they come with a AAA engine built into them. So um, I would really, yeah, these classes are great because no one's telling you what does it mean? What do I have to do a backup? How's a backup? What is a backup? And is it important to run more than one backups? Yes, it is. Is it important to run restore jobs? Yes, it is. How often should I run a restore job? Once a year? No. Once a quarter, or keep track of all the restore jobs you do. I mean, that kind of information, if you're going to hire a person and they're going to charge you, 150, $200 an hour to tell you that. So this class was like $100, and if you're in 14 of them, there's $1,400 that you would have to have paid to somebody to listen to them tell you what all these things just mean. Then there's the second part, which is to implement them, and there are even more hours, literally hundreds of hours to set up management networks in your cloud infrastructure or physical management networks in your facilities at your multi-facility location. I mean, that could take dozens of hours to rerun wires to your, and then identify if your equipment even has management ports, or to segregate your network infrastructure into VLANs and make sure you have layer 2 and layer 3 switching. You may just have a dummy switch in one of your facilities that doesn't support layer 2 and layer 3, which enables the VLAN capabilities of those particular pieces of equipment. If you don't even have that particular type of hardware, you're gonna have to purchase the hardware. So you're gonna have to buy that. And if you have a VAST across all of your infrastructure, or Panda, or at FreeAVG, or Network Defender, or whatever, you're gonna have to replace that, buy the software, install it, and then have somebody who watches it and gets alerts from it. It's gonna send you an alert. Oh, Jerry opened a virus, and everyone's going to get alerted in a centralized location, and you're going to have a SOC and a knock and a help desk, and it's a lot of money. We're talking big money, and if you're a small company, that can be overwhelming. So you want to be able to cut as close to the bone as possible. Well, there's no questions, and I just rambled on there for a minute to see if anyone had any, but no one has any, so we're going to end it for today, and I'm hoping everyone will have a great vacation or a great weekend. So have a good time. Thank you so much. Oh, there's a chat. Hi, Don from CMMCCP training. I'm totally lost, but I took some notes and I'll be looking up some items. I did recognize a few terms and happy you defined business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan. I'm pretty sure I gave both of those to Jeremy. So he has some good templates, and those templates really, all you got to do is open them up and just pretend, just edit and replace wherever you want. So go ahead and grab that biz continuity plan and disaster recovery plan. Again, they can be combined into one document, but he has good templates. Just ask him for them, Jeremy, and he'll send them over to you. If not, I'll give them to him.
Yeah. Hey, I'll add this there, Don. Since you're a CCP client as well, you're going to get it with your instance. So we'll get you on that side.
Oh, great. Yeah. So you have them, Jeremy? I believe I gave them to you.
Somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So if anyone asks you for them, give it to them. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm gonna leave now.